a strip of land on the southeastern coast of Cuba, surrounded by barbed wire, isolation, and controversy. This is Guantanamo Bay. For over 2 decades, it's been the world's most notorious prison, where terror suspects vanish, laws bend, and silence screams louder than justice. But Guantanamo didn't start with the war on terror, and it's not fading into history. Step inside the fence, enter Guantanamo, and see what the world was never meant to witness. Guantanamo Bay has been under American control since 1903, when the U.S. signed a lease with Cuba's newly independent government. The deal granted the U.S. complete jurisdiction and control over 45 square miles of Cuban land, while Cuba retained ultimate sovereignty. As part of the agreement, the U.S. sends an annual lease payment of $4,085, written as a physical check. But Fidel Castro, revolutionary and former president of Cuba, considered the arrangement illegitimate. He reportedly kept the checks untouched in a desk drawer, cashing only one during a brief moment of confusion in the early years of the revolution. For nearly a century, Guantanamo was just a remote naval outpost, a training ground, and a logistics hub. That changed in 2002, when it became a symbol of America's war on terror and a global lightning rod for controversy. After the 9/11 attacks, the U.S. faced an urgent question. What should be done with captured terror suspects? They weren't soldiers in uniform. They weren't arrested under standard criminal laws. The Bush administration needed a place and a legal framework that could handle them outside the rules. The answer was Guantanamo Bay. In January 2002, the U.S. opened the Guantanamo Bay detention camp. Its location, on a leased naval base in Cuba, was chosen deliberately.
The American flag flies again over our embassy in Kabul. Terrorists who once occupied Afghanistan now occupy cells at Guantanamo Bay.
Not quite American soil, not entirely foreign, Guantanamo sat in a legal gray zone. This made it, in the words of legal scholars, a constitutional black hole. Prisoners held there were classified as enemy combatants, a vague and unprecedented term. They were not granted the protections of the Geneva Conventions, which apply to prisoners of war, nor did they receive the rights guaranteed to criminal defendants under U.S. law. This meant no formal charges, no trial dates, no access to traditional courts. By 2003, nearly 680 detainees were imprisoned at Guantanamo, most captured during the early days of the war in Afghanistan or handed over by third-party governments, sometimes in exchange for bounties. Some were members of al-Qaeda or the Taliban, but many others were swept up with little evidence, no due process, and no clear way to prove their innocence. What began as a temporary solution became a permanent legal experiment, one that would define a generation of American counterterrorism policy. Guantanamo Bay became synonymous with torture, waterboarding, mock executions, sleep deprivation, stress positions, forced nudity, sexual humiliation. Techniques once considered unthinkable were rebranded as enhanced interrogation and justified in the name of national security. The CIA and military operated under a legal framework designed to sidestep the Geneva Conventions, relying on secret memos and classified orders to authorize brutal treatment. High-profile detainees, including Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged mastermind of 9/11, were subjected to these methods repeatedly. Mohammed was waterboarded 183 times. Others were beaten, shackled in painful positions, or exposed to extreme cold and blaring noise for days on end. In 2014, the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee released a bombshell report after years of investigation. Its conclusion was damning. The torture was not only inhumane, but ineffective. Vital intelligence was rarely gained, and when it was, it could often have been obtained by conventional means. Worse, false confessions and bad leads misled investigators and delayed real progress. Despite this, the program continued for years. It became institutionalized, routine, a shadow justice system where suspicion alone could mean indefinite detention and brutal treatment. Some men were held for over a decade without ever being charged. Others were eventually released, cleared of any wrongdoing after years of abuse and psychological trauma. For many, their lives were destroyed, without ever seeing a courtroom. And for the world, Guantanamo became not just a symbol of American power, but of what happens when fear overrides law. Legal chaos reigned. For years, detainees at Guantanamo had no way to challenge their imprisonment. They were held indefinitely, without charges, without trials, and without access to the U.S. legal system. That changed in 2008, when the Supreme Court ruled in Boumediene versus Bush that the right of habeas corpus applied to Guantanamo. Habeas corpus, Latin for "you shall have the body," is a foundational legal principle that allows prisoners to challenge the legality of their detention in court. It's the difference between lawful imprisonment and indefinite detention without due process. But justice moved slowly. The military commissions set up to try suspects were plagued by secrecy, ever-changing rules, and evidence tainted by torture. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's trial, nearly 20 years in the making, still hasn't reached a verdict. Lawyers, judges, and even military insiders have called the commissions a broken system, propped up more by politics than by any real pursuit of justice. While we take a moment here, if you ever find yourself facing legal uncertainty, there are tools that can help. LegalZoom offers access to legal documents and guidance without the high cost of traditional firms. Use the link in the description for 10% off site-wide, whether you're starting something new or protecting what matters. Now, let's return to Guantanamo Bay. When Barack Obama took office in 2009, he made closing Guantanamo one of his first promises. He called the prison a recruitment tool for terrorists and a stain on America's reputation, fueling anti-American sentiment and undermining U.S. credibility abroad. Just 2 days after his inauguration, Obama signed an executive order to close the facility within a year. The plan involved transferring eligible detainees to third countries, prosecuting others in U.S. federal courts, and bringing the rest to high-security prisons on American soil.
It's been clear that the detention facility at Guantanamo Bay does not advance our national security. It undermines it. It's counterproductive to our fight against terrorists because they use it as propaganda in their efforts to recruit. Today, the department is submitting to Congress our plan for finally closing the facility at Guantanamo once and for all.
But almost immediately, the backlash began. Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, blocked funding for any transfers to the U.S., citing security concerns and local opposition. Laws were passed to restrict detainee movements and prevent the construction or repurposing of federal facilities to house them. Obama's hands were tied. He continued to push for closure through diplomacy and case-by-case reviews, managing to reduce the prison population from 242 detainees to just 41 by the end of his second term. But despite 8 years of effort, Guantanamo remained open. The political cost of closure proved too high, and the legal framework too fractured to deliver on his promise. In 2018, President Donald Trump officially reversed the course set by his predecessor. He signed an executive order to keep Guantanamo Bay open indefinitely, declaring that the U.S. must be prepared to detain future terrorism suspects without delay or compromise. In public remarks, Trump called the prison necessary, reinforcing a belief that some threats were too dangerous for civilian courts.
In the past, we have foolishly released hundreds and hundreds of dangerous terrorists. So today, I'm keeping another promise. I just signed, prior to walking in, an order directing Secretary Mattis to re-examine our military detention policy and to keep open the detention facilities in Guantanamo Bay.
He even suggested that newly captured ISIS fighters could be sent there, though that never happened. Despite the tough rhetoric, no new detainees were added during his term. Still, the order marked a symbolic and strategic shift. Guantanamo was no longer just a leftover from the war on terror. It was, once again, part of America's counterterrorism toolkit. Meanwhile, detainees already cleared for release found themselves in bureaucratic limbo. Diplomatic deals to resettle them in other countries collapsed or stalled under the administration's hardline stance. For those men, Guantanamo became a prison with no end date, despite no charges and no trial. When Joe Biden took office, he quietly revived efforts to close the Guantanamo prison. The detainee population has since dropped to around 30, mostly aging men held for decades without resolution. But while the prison fades from headlines, the base itself is entering a new era. Guantanamo is no longer just a relic of post-9/11 warfare. It's being retooled for a different kind of detention. In early 2025, the U.S. expanded the Migrant Operations Center on the base, designating it for individuals flagged as national security threats during immigration screenings.
Today, I'm also signing an executive order to instruct the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. Most people don't even know about it.
Among the first to be detained, suspected members of Tren de Aragua, a transnational Venezuelan gang linked to drug trafficking, extortion, and murder across Latin America. While this facility is technically separate from the prison camp, the optics are strikingly familiar. Military guards, barbed wire, legal gray zones, and once again, foreigners held without trial on foreign soil in America's name. Guantanamo Bay is being repurposed, and its legacy is evolving in ways few could have predicted. For most Americans, Guantanamo Bay is out of sight and out of mind, a distant outpost shrouded in secrecy, far from the daily headlines. But for the men held there, some without charge, trial, or timeline, it's a place where time stopped. And for the U.S. legal system, it remains an unsolvable equation. How do you uphold the rule of law while bypassing it? Guantanamo is more than a prison. It's a symbol of post-9/11 fear, wartime improvisation, and the high cost of exceptional justice. It's where the United States redrew the boundaries of war, detention, and human rights. A prison built to protect freedom by suspending it. And now, as its fences hold both suspected terrorists and asylum seekers, the story of Guantanamo is no longer just about what happened then. It's about what's still happening now. What does it mean to detain without trial? To hold people in limbo forever? And what does Guantanamo Bay say about who we are and who we're becoming? 2 decades later, the gates of Guantanamo remain locked, not just with steel, but with silence, secrecy, and unfinished business. And the world is still waiting for justice, for closure, for accountability. If you found this eye-opening, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. More untold stories are coming. Stay informed, stay curious. If you'd like to support the channel and get something valuable in return, be sure to check out the affiliate links in the description. Every click helps us keep delivering stories that matter.